There comes a moment in many lives when the room grows quiet, the phone stops ringing, the familiar voices fade into the distance, and we are left standing face to face with ourselves. For some, that moment feels uncomfortable. For others, it feels frightening. We have been taught, in ways both obvious and subtle, that happiness must arrive through other people, that peace is something handed to us by love, approval, attention, or companionship. Yet, the deepest peace often begins when we stop searching for someone else to complete a conversation that our own soul has been trying to have with us for years. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. Solitude is not a punishment. It is a place, a sacred place, a place where the masks become too heavy to wear and the truth finally has room to breathe. When no one is watching, no one is applauding, and no one is rescuing us, we begin to discover what has always been there beneath the noise. Our own strength, our own wisdom, our own capacity to endure. Many people spend years waiting for the right person, the right friend, the right opportunity, or the right circumstances to bring them peace. But peace that depends entirely on another person is fragile. It trembles when they leave. It weakens when they change. It disappears when expectations are not met. True peace must have deeper roots. It must grow from within, from a place no rejection can touch, and no absence can destroy. The journey toward inner peace is not about building walls around your heart. It is about building a home within it, a home where your worth does not rise and fall with someone else's opinion, a home where silence is not empty but full of understanding, a home where you can sit with yourself and feel neither restless nor afraid. Today, we will explore what it means to find peace alone, not because we no longer care about people, but because we finally understand that our well-being cannot be placed entirely in their hands. We will uncover the quiet power of self-trust, the freedom of self-acceptance, and the remarkable truth that the relationship you have with yourself shapes every other relationship in your life. Because the day you learn to stand peacefully in your own company is the day you discover a kind of freedom that no one can give and no one can take away. One of the greatest misunderstandings about peace is the belief that it can only be found in the presence of other people. From an early age, many of us are taught to associate happiness with companionship, validation, and belonging. We learn to measure our worth through the attention we receive and the connections we maintain. As a result, being alone often feels like something to avoid rather than something to embrace. Yet solitude, when understood correctly, is not a sign of emptiness. It is a place where strength is quietly formed, where identity becomes clearer, and where peace begins to grow without conditions. There is a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the feeling that something important is missing. Solitude is the realization that something important has been present all along. Loneliness looks outward, searching for someone to fill a space. Solitude looks inward, discovering that the space itself contains wisdom, resilience, and untapped potential. The moment a person begins to understand this difference, being alone transforms from a burden into a gift. Many people fear solitude because it removes distractions. In silence, there are no crowds to hide behind, no conversations to escape into, and no constant noise to drown out difficult thoughts. Solitude invites honesty. It asks us to meet ourselves without performance or pretense. This can feel uncomfortable at first because it reveals insecurities, fears, and unresolved emotions. Yet it is through facing these truths that genuine growth becomes possible. What we avoid controls us. What we confront begins to lose its power. Strength is not always developed through struggle with the outside world. Often, it is developed through quiet moments of reflection. A person sitting alone with their thoughts, learning to understand their emotions and accept their imperfections, may be building greater resilience than someone constantly surrounded by activity. Solitude teaches patience because there is no one else to entertain us. It teaches self-reliance because we learn to comfort ourselves during difficult times. It teaches confidence because we begin making decisions based on our own values rather than the approval of others. When people become comfortable in their own company, they stop treating relationships as a lifeline. They no longer seek others out of desperation or fear. Instead, they connect from a place of fullness. Their friendships become healthier because they are not demanding constant reassurance. Their relationships become stronger because they are not built upon dependency. The peace they carry does not disappear when circumstances change, because it is rooted within. There is also a unique kind of freedom that emerges through solitude. It is the freedom to think your own thoughts, to hear your own voice, and to understand your own desires without interference. In a world that constantly tells people who they should be, solitude offers the opportunity to discover who they truly are. It creates space for reflection, creativity, and self-discovery. It allows a person to step away from expectations and reconnect with their authentic self. Within that quiet space, hidden strengths often reveal themselves. Old wounds begin to heal, and a deeper sense of peace starts to take root, growing steadily beneath the surface of everyday life. One of the most important steps toward finding peace alone is learning to hear your own voice above the noise of outside expectations. The world is filled with opinions about who you should be, how you should live, what you should achieve, and even how you should feel. From family traditions to social pressures, from cultural standards to the endless comparisons created by modern life, people are constantly receiving messages that attempt to define their worth. Over time, these voices can become so loud that they drown out the quiet wisdom already living within. Many people spend years following paths that do not truly belong to them, simply because they have never paused long enough to listen to themselves. The search for approval often begins innocently. Human beings naturally desire acceptance and connection. There is nothing wrong with wanting to belong. The problem arises when the desire for approval becomes stronger than the desire for authenticity. When that happens, people begin making choices based on what will please others rather than what aligns with their own values. They say yes when they want to say no. They remain silent when they need to speak. They pursue goals that impress others while neglecting the dreams that genuinely inspire them. Each compromise may seem small, but over time it creates distance between a person and their true self. Finding peace requires closing that distance. It begins with creating moments of stillness where the outside world no longer dictates every thought and decision. In silence, a remarkable thing happens. The opinions of others lose some of their power. The endless need for validation begins to weaken. Beneath all the noise, a quieter voice starts to emerge. It may not speak loudly at first. It may be hesitant after years of being ignored. But it carries something valuable. Truth. It knows what brings fulfillment. It recognizes what feels meaningful. It understands the difference between living according to expectations and living according to purpose. Listening to your own voice does not mean rejecting all advice or refusing to learn from others. Wisdom can come from many places. The challenge is learning to filter external influences through your own understanding rather than surrendering your judgment entirely. A peaceful life is not built by blindly following every opinion that comes your way. It is built by thoughtfully considering information and then making decisions that reflect your deepest values. Many people discover that once they start trusting their own voice, they become less affected by criticism and comparison. They no longer need constant reassurance because they are guided by an internal compass rather than the shifting approval of the crowd. Success becomes more personal. Happiness becomes less dependent on recognition. Even mistakes become easier to handle because they are part of a life chosen intentionally rather than one lived to satisfy others. There is tremendous freedom in realizing that you do not need permission to be yourself. You do not need universal agreement to follow a meaningful path. The moment you begin honoring your own voice, you reclaim a part of yourself that may have been buried beneath expectations for years. In that space, peace grows naturally because your actions, values, and identity begin moving in the same direction, creating a quiet sense of harmony that cannot be manufactured through approval, applause, or the expectations of anyone else around you. Healing emotional dependence begins with recognizing how often people hand over the responsibility for their happiness to someone else. It can happen so gradually that it feels normal. A person starts believing they can only feel secure when a certain individual is present, only feel valuable when they receive praise, or only feel complete when someone constantly reassures them. What begins as affection or connection slowly transforms into dependence. Instead of enjoying relationships as a meaningful part of life, they begin using them as the primary source of stability. The problem with this approach is that it places personal peace in the hands of circumstances that cannot be controlled. Every person will eventually encounter change. People move away, relationships evolve, misunderstandings occur, and life follows its unpredictable course. When emotional well-being depends entirely on another person, every change feels threatening. A delayed message creates anxiety. A disagreement feels devastating. Distance feels unbearable. The fear of losing connection becomes stronger than the ability to enjoy it. Rather than experiencing peace, a person becomes trapped in a cycle of worry, seeking constant confirmation that everything is still secure. The path toward freedom begins when individuals understand that self-trust is more reliable than external reassurance. Self-trust is the quiet confidence that says, no matter what happens, I can handle it. It is not arrogance, and it does not mean pretending that pain does not exist. Instead, it means believing in your ability to navigate challenges, recover from disappointment, and continue moving forward even when life becomes difficult. This belief creates a foundation that remains steady regardless of what other people choose to do. Building self-trust requires small acts of courage repeated consistently over time. It develops when you keep promises to yourself. It grows when you make decisions based on your values instead of your fears. It strengthens each time you face uncertainty without immediately seeking someone else to rescue or guide you. Every challenge you overcome becomes evidence that you are more capable than you once believed. Gradually, confidence shifts from something you receive from others to something you cultivate within yourself. An important part of healing emotional dependence is learning to comfort yourself during difficult moments. Many people have been conditioned to seek immediate relief from outside sources whenever they feel sadness, fear, or insecurity. While support from others can be valuable, inner peace requires the ability to sit with emotions without being overwhelmed by them. It means learning that discomfort is not a sign of weakness. It is a natural part of being human. When people stop running from every uncomfortable feeling, they discover that emotions rise, change, and eventually pass. As self-trust deepens, relationships begin to transform. They are no longer driven by fear of abandonment or constant need. Instead, they are built upon mutual respect, genuine affection, and freedom. People connect because they want to, not because they believe they cannot survive alone. This creates healthier bonds and a stronger sense of individuality. Love becomes something shared rather than something desperately clung to. The most lasting security does not come from knowing that someone will always stay. It comes from knowing that even if circumstances change, your sense of worth, strength, and identity will remain intact because you have learned to rely on the steady foundation that exists within your own heart and mind. Discovering peace through self-acceptance and personal reflection is one of the most transformative journeys a person can undertake. Many individuals spend years at war with themselves, constantly focusing on what they lack, what they wish they could change, or how they believe they fall short of certain expectations. They compare their lives to the lives of others, measure their worth against impossible standards, and carry the burden of feeling as though they must become someone different before they deserve happiness. This endless struggle creates inner tension, making peace feel distant and unreachable. Yet peace does not begin when a person becomes perfect. It begins when a person learns to accept themselves as they are while continuing to grow. Self-acceptance is not the same as complacency. It does not mean ignoring weaknesses or refusing to improve. Instead, it means recognizing your humanity without condemnation. Every person carries flaws, insecurities, regrets, and imperfections. These experiences are not evidence of failure. They are evidence of life. The problem arises when people treat their imperfections as proof that they are unworthy. They begin speaking to themselves with a harshness they would never direct towards someone they love. Over time, this self-criticism becomes a constant background noise that drains joy and fuels dissatisfaction. Personal reflection offers a way to quiet that noise. Reflection creates space to examine thoughts, emotions, and experiences with honesty rather than judgment. It allows people to step back from the rush of daily life and ask meaningful questions. What beliefs have shaped the way I see myself? Which fears continue to influence my decisions? What expectations am I carrying that no longer serve me? These questions are not always comfortable, but they are often necessary. Through reflection, people gain clarity about the stories they have been telling themselves and whether those stories are helping or harming them. Many individuals discover that much of their suffering comes from resisting reality. They resist their past mistakes, their current circumstances, or aspects of themselves they wish were different. This resistance creates a constant internal battle. Self-acceptance does not erase pain, but it removes the struggle against what already exists. It allows people to acknowledge their experiences without becoming trapped by them. Instead of endlessly wishing things had been different, they begin working with what is present in this moment. There is a profound sense of freedom that comes from accepting yourself without conditions. When self-worth is no longer dependent on achievement, appearance, status, or external approval, life becomes lighter. People stop chasing validation as proof of their value. They stop exhausting themselves, trying to meet every expectation placed upon them. They begin to understand that their worth is not something they must earn. It is something they already possess. Reprivation also reveals strengths that often go unnoticed. In quiet moments, people remember challenges they have survived, lessons they have learned, and resilience they have demonstrated. They begin to see themselves more clearly, not as perfect beings, but as individuals who have endured, adapted, and grown. This balanced perspective creates compassion, patience, and understanding toward oneself. As self-acceptance deepens, inner conflict gradually gives way to inner harmony. The need to constantly prove, defend, or reinvent oneself begins to fade. In its place emerges a calmer relationship with life, rooted in honesty, understanding, and the quiet recognition that being fully human is enough. Creating a life rooted in wholeness rather than in the need for constant validation is one of the most powerful ways to find lasting peace. Many people move through life believing that their value depends on how they are perceived by others. They look for approval in compliments, recognition, social acceptance, achievements, and external success. While appreciation from others can feel rewarding, it becomes dangerous when it turns into the foundation of self-worth. A life built entirely upon validation is fragile because it depends on factors that are constantly changing. Opinions shift, circumstances evolve, and people come and go. If your sense of value depends entirely on these external sources, your peace will always remain vulnerable. The desire for validation is deeply human. Everyone wants to feel seen, appreciated, and understood. The challenge arises when validation becomes a necessity rather than a pleasant addition to life. When this happens, people begin shaping their actions around the expectations of others. They choose paths that gain approval rather than fulfillment. They silence parts of themselves that might be criticized. They become performers in their own lives, constantly seeking applause, while losing touch with who they truly are. Wholeness begins when a person realizes that they are not incomplete. Society often sends the message that fulfillment exists somewhere outside of ourselves. It suggests that happiness will arrive when we gain enough success, receive enough admiration, find the perfect relationship, or achieve a particular image of perfection. Yet many people reach these milestones and still feel empty because the deeper need was never external. It was internal. The missing piece was not another accomplishment or another person's approval. It was a stronger connection with themselves. Living from a place of wholeness means recognizing that your worth is inherent. It does not increase when people praise you, nor does it decrease when they criticize you. It remains steady because it is rooted in something deeper than public opinion. This understanding creates a profound shift in how a person approaches life. Decisions are no longer based solely on what will impress others. They are guided by personal values, meaningful goals, and authentic desires. When people stop chasing validation, they often discover a new sense of freedom. They become more willing to take risks, express honest opinions, and pursue paths that genuinely resonate with them. Fear of judgment loses much of its power because their identity is no longer dependent on universal approval. They understand that disagreement and criticism are inevitable parts of life rather than threats to their worth. Relationships also become healthier when they are approached from a place of wholeness. Instead of seeking someone to fill emotional gaps, people bring their complete selves into the connection. They give love without desperation and receive love without dependency. Their relationships are based on mutual respect rather than emotional neediness. This creates stronger and more balanced connections. A life rooted in wholeness is not free from challenges, disappointments, or moments of doubt. However, it possesses a stable center that remains intact even when circumstances become difficult. It allows a person to appreciate recognition without depending on it, to enjoy relationships without losing themselves within them, and to pursue success without attaching their entire identity to outcomes. From this foundation grows a quiet confidence, a deeper sense of purpose, and a lasting peace that is no longer controlled by the changing opinions, expectations, or approval of the world around them.